Hi everybody, I just want to make this quick recording. Normally I would not be doing these type of lectures. I will be letting you do most of the readings. I will be providing materials. I might write a kind of direction of how to think about things. But since it is week 2, I think that it's appropriate for me to kind of get into a little bit of a lecture to kind of give you thinking about how I want you thinking about this class moving forward. Please do the readings. Do not skip the readings. That's why you have a textbook. Do the readings. So make sure you do that. Make sure you, when the discussion is open, make sure you provide a serious discussion. I will provide you a rubric for the discussion. Pay attention to that rubric. Also, make sure that you ask a question. I know it was the first week, so it's hard to kind of develop a question. If you can still put one together, that's fine. Enter your question there. Class gets to rate the questions, and I will pick the top questions and any questions that I think are appropriate, and I will try to provide an answer for it, moving down the lines within a week or so of the class. That way we kind of have this kind of like, back and forth going together. That said, let me talk a little bit about the demography of aging. And I'm going to talk of it from a global perspective. Your book goes into a global perspective. It does some stuff with the U.S. Feel free to go to U.S. Census, go to different web pages and try to figure out U.S. Aging expectations. It's always good to kind of get a good sense of like what's going on. I can tell you that what the data is showing is that we are getting older. That is just what's happening. Let me start real quick. I just want to show you that we do have an understanding of kind of stages that countries go to. These are nation states, and we stick to nation states because usually their data is usually provided at a nation state level. But understand that this is culture, this is technology based. A lot of things that are happening in these countries where they're located as a nation kind of affects where they are in these stages, right? Not all stages are exactly the same, but this is what we found is the common stage, right? Stage 1, high stationary means a flat. This yellow line here means growth, population growth, and what happens. And a country that's seen as being in stage 1, basically what's happening is that the birth rate and death rates are up and down, and you have stable population growth. I'll show you an example of that in the next couple of slides. Then you have stage 2, where we talk about early expanding. And so what happens is that fertility rates begin to go up, sometimes at extremely high rates, and then death rates begin to go down. And what's happening here is that twofold. We are extending the lives of people because we're providing health care, we're providing assistance with them being able to live a healthier life. We are, medicines are being introduced at the same time in the same way. People are able to have more children, right? So death rates, kind of like increase, and then you see how they kind of like fertility rates begin to drop, right? So it's not like this, you see this kind of increase that happens, and then fertility rates begin to drop. And a lot of that is because as people are living longer, as they're being healthier, most of them are being more productive, and they're engaged in the economy, and they're working more. So you're starting to see this kind of like double, but the death rate is really what makes a significant difference in that population growth. And you see behind here this like sliding up a population that seems to be like just massing up right away, right? As that continues, you reach the stage 3, which is late expanding. And in this late expanding stage is when you're starting to reach the credential of population growth. Still a little bit more to go, but not as much. And you start to see a convergence between fertility rates as they begin to drop significantly at this point. This here to this down here is much more significant drop, and then you see a stabilization in death rates, right, where you have a certain number of populations, and providing the healthcare that you're providing, the medicines you're providing, the overall increasing of life expectancies begins to flatten out. That's what's happening here, and that begins to flatten out. And so with the decline in death rates and so on, you see a kind of like the population is still increasing because the fertility rate is still higher, but you kind of see a slowing down of that increase. By the time you get to the Stage 4, it's low stationary, and basically death rates and birth rates are both pretty low, and so populations begin to be more stabilized. You still get some growth early on, but then you have this kind of like stagnation of the, that's a controversial word, but you have this kind of stagnation of population growth because you've reached kind of your zenith. And then, right, death rates begin to, when you reach stage 5, death rates are overtake fertility rates. That means fewer people are having children, which increases the number of people dying, and so you start to see population declines. And we've seen countries that are in these stages. So that, for example, just to give you an example, right? This is Niger, the country of Niger over in Northern Africa, and you can see here, this is a population pyramid. Population pyramids, you'll see this in your book, are basically a description of the population from early age to old age. Old age here on top, 85 years plus, and here on the young age, right? And here on one side you see men, on the other side you see women. You can see here clearly that basically the number of men to women are about the same, just so that you know biologically about for every 100 women that are born, 110 men are born. Keep that number in mind for something I want to say, but usually the number of men is usually just slightly bigger, very early age than women. And then, you know, here you see that in their population, right, this is in 2020, you have very few people living towards this older age and a lot of people that are very young. So not a lot of people survive at lower age, and this keeps the population pretty, you know, steady, right? Death rates and birth rates are pretty stable all the way. You don't have this ballooning increase of the population. Sorry about that. So now you have, here's Ghana, this is stage 2 one, right? And you see a pyramid that looks more like a pyramid. Right? This looks more like what a pyramid would look like, right? And so this is an important one. See again, at a particular point, more men than women. I know it's hard to tell, just if you see this number gap here, the gaps here is smaller than the gap on this side. I've been doing this for years. It's an eye-catching thing that I kind of like automatically notice. So you see that happening there, and so you have, this is an example of what that population would look like, right? Stage 3, well, stage 3, what you're having is that you're having people slightly live longer, right? So you're having a stabilization. Fertility rates are still, you know, they're a little lower, but they're still there. You see that decline fertility rates, but then you see that there are more people living a little bit longer. So the distribution is not quite of a pyramid where you have, you know, it's taking on this kind of like little bit of a ball shape, you know, like, you know, I guess the top looks like a bullet shape, if you will, but that's kind of the shape that it's kind of taking place. Stage 4 population is like Canada. And stage 4, you can see here where the fertility rates are way down here, but look how much longer people are living. Yes, interestingly enough, right, so if you see here, right, men are being born in greater numbers than women. This is just a biological fact. And so, but women outlive men. This is going to be important. Keep that in mind. And then here's a good example of a stage 5, which is Japan, where you have completely the opposite. There are more older people than there are younger people. The fertility rate has completely flipped, and the death rate is, you know, so there are many more older people in Japan than there are younger people. And this becomes problematic when you think about who takes care of these older people, right? Like, you have this working age population, the production years, you know, if you really want to think about it, right, up to around this 64 year of age down to this 25 year of age, right? These are the working productive years. Why am I not including the 18 and 19 year olds? Because let's just say they're in college, they're, you know, some of them are doing, so it's not a full hands-on deck kind of generational thing. But these other groups, it's really hands-on deck at this point, and you see that that number of people who are taking care of the people above them is decreasing. So there's fewer people to take care of older people, and so this creates a challenge in a lot of these countries. Here's another way of looking at it from a global perspective, right? This is the total fertility rate in the regions from 2020 to 2035 and 2050. This is how it's being predicted. This blue is the 2050, this is the 2035, and this is, you can see declines in fertility rates. And obviously, Africa as a continent has the most significant decline because they are closer to stage 1, stage 2, and as they begin to go into stage 3, stage 4, you start to see this decline happening. This is a good example of that. And then you see North America, there's kind of a flat, right, in the fertility rate. It doesn't grow, it doesn't expand. You see Europe has a possibility of increase in fertility rate, but probably this is I think wishful thinking in a lot of ways. And Asia, you see the decline in fertility rates, which is kind of normal. I won't get into the politics of what's happening in Europe, so I'll just say that this is probably, this slight variation is probably not as big. A lot of this is immigration, by the way. It's driven by immigration. That's what's driving this. In North America, because of a lot of contemporary immigration issues, we've kind of flattened out. In Europe, there's an expectation there'll be more migrants coming in, and that's why they're expecting high fertility rates. So there, that's the explanation for that. All right, so here's a projection of population 65 and older by world region, right? This is the growth that's expected from 2020. You can see this massive growth, in Asia, in Europe. You can see this in Latin America. You can see this growth in North America. This kind of, well, we'll stay stable for this, but there's already a significant amount of people there. So these growth globally. The sex ratio, this is important, sex ratio over years. This is something that is for 2020. And I'm using this as an example for you to see what it is that we're talking about. So in general, this is the number of males per every 100 females, and you can see here that it's just a little below 110, so in the United States in 2020. So these are kids who are born, right? And so they are at, let's just call this 107, right? And then you see that, here from 5 to 9, it's probably about the same, stay stable. And then you see that there begins to be a decline in the number of men to women right around age 20. And then decline continues all the way to 34. And then you see this decline that occurs here are those years where men do stupid things. So you start to see a decline over this time period between the 30 to 50 range. You continue to see a decline. Most of that is work related. A lot of it is because men do. This is not because women can't, but men tend to go into occupations that have a significant amount of more hazards. So you tend to see both a decline in health and a decline in just because of the danger of the job. So those are conditions that create this kind of decline during these ages. Men tend to mellow out during these ages, although nowadays, who knows? But anyway, and then you start to see this massive drop, right? And this massive drop is important. Males, this is number of males to every 100 females. So for every 100 male at the 100 years of age, right? I'm sorry. They are only about 25 males for every 100 women at 100, right? If you look at 95, the way you would read this is that there are about 35 men for every 100 women. So as you get older, for those of you who are men, the sex difference really changes quite a bit. And you'll see this, for example, in stereotypes in movies and other areas where usually it's one guy, older guy, showing up to a place where there's a lot of older women kind of thing. So a lot of that is based on this table right here, this kind of line graph on how that occurs. And it's important to keep that in mind because at a certain point, men begin to die off significantly, and right around this age 75 and 79 you see this dramatic drop. A lot of that is because men take poor they don't take better care of themselves, and a lot of it is the work that they've done and the works that are related. Usually a lot of them are heavy occupationals, heavy they hurts the body, and therefore the body tends to age faster when you go through a lot of these stress related. All these things are a part of that. We'll be talking about all these things later on. Just so that you know, I'm looking at the clock, and I know I'm getting to the 15-minute point, and I apologize. I'm going to go through this quickly. Usually I like to keep these to 10 minutes at the most, So bear with me, I'll try to get this going. Here's a good example by Henzik and Sterlich on biological age. I put the site here. I'll add the article for you to look at if you're interested in. We'll talk more about biological age, right? And what I wanted to show is the differences, right, between 1990, 2005, and 2019. And biological age is saying, like, all right, how old do you feel, right? How old is your body feeling, right? And so here you have across the globe, right, you can see that in 1990, right, someone who was at 55 years of age was, most people were feeling better. They're not feeling that, they're 55 age. They're feeling over on this side, right? And you can see the transition of this in 2005, and you can see the transition of this in 2019. Same thing for men. You can see that men, right, were back here on the age of 55. They're on the back side of it, and over time, they're creeping closer to their actual biological age. When you look at this for people who are 65 years and older, you can see that in 1990, the bulk of the people who were 65 felt 65. And so here you start to see that in 2005, people don't start feeling this age until they're much older. Same thing with this blue line here. You start to see this over here, the distribution of each one of these. You see it here again at 75, right? The 75 age. And people here in 2019, right? Feeling closer to that. Here's another example of the change in that levels from, this is 1990, this is 1990 to 2019 changes. And what's important here is you see the flatness here, and you see these dark green. These dark greens is where a significant amount of these changes are happening. And you can see that they're happening in Africa, they're happening in the Middle East. So that provides you a kind of a good understanding of this age distribution as it's taking place. Now, what I want to make sure, and I apologize that the lighting here is so bad, but you're not missing much, is for you to understand when you're reading this material, you're reading this book, you're thinking about the impact that aging has on these societies, on our society. What does it mean that so many people are getting older? If you remember from chapter 1, you're looking at seeing at the potential for gerontology and studying aging and what's the significance of that. Most of you are taking this class, maybe it is that you're thinking like, oh, okay, this will be an interesting class to take about people aging. I can tell you right now that the future of most work isn't going to be on children. That's just the nature of the way in which demographics are heading. And what's going to happen is that the future of most occupations are going to be focused on how to address older populations and what does that mean for our society, and thinking about policies that take into account the shifts in these demographics and the needs that are going to increase in those areas. Do the readings, pay attention to that, and again, I will not be doing too many of these, so please don't worry. I'm not going to hold you hostage for 20 minutes. I'm definitely going to keep it down to 10 minutes. I'll set the timer next time and go through it much, much faster. But I do appreciate it. Welcome to week 2. Do the discussions, and please do the question. And I will give 2 weeks usually for you to be able to do the work. That's plenty of time to be able to submit the work. I will try to grade right around that time I'll try to grade quickly if you can submit stuff quickly, but we'll eventually shift to like every 2 weeks, everything will be graded at that point so that you can get your grade and follow through. I will talk to you soon. Take care.